since you guys have seen this car. If you don't recognize it, this is our 1981 Ford Fairmont station wagon. It's a 26,000 original mile car that we did a twin turbo LS swap into. It was one of the first complete build series that we did on this channel. Still in our growing phase, you know, some of the videos were a little meh, but so today we're going to work on this car. As most of you probably know, project cars are never really done. You can say that, you know, it's ready, but they're never done. There's always that one little thing that you always wanted to try, or that, you know, last little part you'd like to put on it. And that is very true with this car. So I did not race this car at all last year, mainly because we had that pretty significant engine failure with the Nova. So the Nova is a stock bottom end 6-liter aluminum block with 2 turbos, and we made about it was 840 recorded, but it was spinning the tires on the roller on the dyno, and this car made 936 horsepower to the ground, and it's also a stock bottom end 6-liter. So we put big holes in the block on that car, and ever since then I've been kind of scared to run the car. Not really scared of losing the parts, more scared of wrecking the car, you know, from, you know, the oil that would be put underneath the tires, and, you know, the car would get stupid. And the car sits kind of high, so if I were to get into the grass or something and it dug in, you know, it would be pretty easy to roll. So yeah, I was very hesitant to run the car. Also, you know, I couldn't really afford to replace the engine. That was a secondary thing, though. I actually almost sold the car. I'm the kind of person that if I'm not using something, it needs to go. So I barely used this thing last year. Took it to like one car show. Drove it around a handful of times. And so I even listed it for sale. I actually got an offer that I probably would have accepted, but if you go and add up all the time and all the parts that went into this car, it didn't make sense. So I decided that I'm going to keep the car a little longer. I'd still like to do drag week with it, and we're just going to make it into what I want, and we're going to go from there. So what we're going to do this year, now that I have a plan for replacement of the engine, I'd like to do a totally different setup, still an LS, just different parts. But since I have a plan now, I recently, I guess not really discovered, just sort of remembered about engine diapers. Some of you may have been screaming that during my previous couple seconds of talking, but so I bought one from Motion Raceworks. It is designed to fit around the pan that I have on the car. It's just literally just a ballistic, kind of like almost like a bulletproof vest. I believe there's Kevlar and all kinds of stuff in here. High quality stuff, but essentially what I'm hoping to accomplish with this is, if the engine decides to frag, one, catch all the bits and try to keep them off the track. I know I mean, I personally know one of the track owners, and I know how annoying it is to clean oil and all kinds of debris off of the track. So that's one of the goals. The other goal is to keep the oil from getting underneath the tires and possibly causing a wreck. Now, I will say my goals are not to blow this up. but this will certainly make me a little more secure and not as concerned about, if it does. So ideally, we're going to run this a little bit longer, and we're going to do the next combo, which will be forged bottom end, forged crank, forged rods, yeah, good parts. And I won't have to worry about that ever again. I'll still run the blanket, obviously, but so that's one of the goals. And then there's tons of other things that I wanted to try. The car takes a little bit of a long time to spool up on the trans brake. Sure, I could have given a little more RPM. There's definitely stuff I could have done with the ignition timing, but what I would like to try, since the goal with this car is only 1,000 horsepower, I know, only 1,000 horsepower. We're running twin 7875s. They can make 700-800 by themselves. So what I'd like to do is they make smaller turbine housings for these. And I have 96 AR on here, and I'd like to put 68 AR. So that should increase the spool performance, and it shouldn't have any detriments on the performance of the engine, since we're nowhere close to the limits of the turbo. So that's another thing I want to change. Also, I'd like to add a bump box. I have a sort of a creative way to do that. From watching Murder Nova and a little bit of Cletus McFarlane and a little bit of my friend dealing with the bump box, I think I have a creative way to do the bump specifically that I haven't really seen before. It may be being used. I'm not going to make claim to the idea, but more on that later. And then the other thing is, I never actually got the digital dash to work. Sure, it's in the dash. If you caught the traction control video on this car, I made this fancy, dash that recessed into the dash and looked really fancy, but I never actually wired the thing up and got it to work. So I'd like to do all of that in this video today, and so there's nothing more to do than to get to work. Alright guys, so a little bit of story time. So if you remember the very first pass that I made with this car, the damper came apart. I had a SFI approved harmonic damper. The front trim ring, this is a stock damper, the front trim ring, actually the bolts that bolted it to the harmonic damper, they shook loose, and this trim ring basically came loose, and you can actually see, you can't see it, but you can see marks on the water pump where it hit, but you'll notice my radiator hose is right here. So it swung around, cut the radiator hose right here, and put water underneath my back tires. So after that happened, I decided that I needed a better harmonic damper. So I went with what I thought was the best. And that was in the ATI Super Damper. What ended up happening there was I did not receive instructions with the damper. So I just installed it like any other damper. And the bolt in the front shook loose, and then the damper shook loose, and it threw the damper when I was driving down the street. So if I rotate the wheel, you can see right there, pretty big dent, another pretty big dent right here, and another pretty big dent here. So that whole wheel is bent because the damper came off of the crankshaft, exited over here, and you can actually see a pretty big dent in my exhaust. It must have bounced around in here, and you can see how much energy it came off with. I mean, I wasn't, accelerating very hard. It was maybe, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 RPM. And so I ended up actually buying another super damper, and it came with instructions. And it talked about all kinds of stuff that I probably should have done, like measuring the interference. So before I get a whole bunch of comments about this, yes, I did check the crankshaft. I spun it around with a dial indicator, and it is not bent, but I guess I just didn't get the bolt in the front tight enough, and it threw my $500 harmonic damper. So yeah, that was oh, so much fun. Not really. Alright, so now that we got the engine diaper done, we are going to work on changing the turbine housing. So let's talk quick about what I want to do there. Alright, so if you look closely, you will see dirt spots that come out radially from the back of the turbine housing. So what's happening there is when I start the vehicle, the V-band is leaking and it spits junk out, and then it kind of seals up and goes away. I find that mildly annoying. So what I want to do is, if you guys are familiar with Monkey Fabrication, it's a company out of Texas. The guy Mike that runs it just came out with these guys. They are copper inserts for V-bands, and basically it functions as a gasket that goes into your V-band and seals it up, and it's replaceable. So what I did was I ordered 4 sets of the replaceable gaskets. And what I want to do, since it's going to be rather hard to machine the V-band that's already attached to the exhaust, what I want to do is I want to machine my 0.68 turbine housing to accept these copper inserts, so that when they're attached to the regular V-band, they sit up against there and hopefully seal a little better than what I have. Now, you'll also notice that I've already welded a V-band to the outside, or the outlet of this turbine. So I had this turbo briefly on my Studebaker, and it has 3.5-inch exhaust. So I need to cut that off and machine it flat, and then machine it for these guys. So while I'm machining, might as well, and we're going to see how it goes. So let's get to it. housing. So with that being done, let's get it onto the car. Alright guys, so we got our smaller turbine housings installed, and overall the copper gasket worked out pretty well. I've already started the car, and it appears to have sealed it up, so very happy with that. Additionally, I have gotten my digital dash to work, so very happy with how that came out. Obviously it says not connected because I have my laptop plugged in. I can't have the dash and the laptop plugged in at the same time, unfortunately, but that's no big deal. So I'm gonna have to get to the bump box in the next video, but we made some progress. So engine blankets on, the turbine housings are on. I was not able to test the trans brake because there's issues with that. I think they're wiring issues, so we'll address that when we tackle the bump box. So with that, make sure you like and subscribe. If you want to see more videos on this car, make sure you leave a comment, and we'll catch you in the next one. Alright, catch you guys.